Good morning. It's 11:06 on a Monday morning. Temperature here in downtown Murphy is 60 degrees. And welcome back, Sheriff Palmer.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Doing very well.
Let's see. I laid out of work last week.
You did?
So, yeah.
I came here expecting to have a conversation with you, and Miss Donna was here, and she said you couldn't get off your mountain.
Yeah, it's one of those situations that if it's a chance of snow or
Right.
basically centers around school delays because I'm doing school delays and closings there.
Uh-huh.
And if there's a 2-hour delay and there's a chance for it to become a closing, there's not time for me to get ready and come to work.
Right.
And plus I do live on a steep driveway that usually stays iced over.
So you work on the school schedule. Is that what I'm hearing?
I do. I'm working on the I work on the school schedule.
Oh.
Especially the closures.
Right.
Yeah. If it's closed, I'm also closed.
Right.
So how you been?
I've been doing well. Everything's been going great.
Very good.
Yeah.
A little warm in here, isn't it?
A little bit.
I need to turn the air conditioner
Yeah, a
on, I
little
believe.
bit.
Here it is in the wintertime, and it's 60 degrees, and we don't run the heat in this side of the building. Emma has heat in her
Right.
side of the building, but I think these big, all the technology here just keeps it hot.
Well, I think people are glad to see some warm weather coming after the little cold snap that we had. I hope that it's not all rain during the warm weather, though. I hope we get to see a little sunshine out of this.
Yeah, it looks like a little rainy week, and possibly Wednesday night and Thursday we may see even some more winter weather
Right.
return. So
It's not over with yet.
not yet. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed just
Right.
in case. But have we had any significant problems because of the cold weather and the snow and the ice?
No, not really. We've, like I say, we met earlier in the year and talked with the homeless shelter and different people about the homeless population and people who may need assistance during the cold weather snaps and things of that nature. But we've not had any real major issues or major problems with that. We've helped a few people get to some warm places, give them rides to houses and things of that nature. But as far as utilizing the shelter, having to open something up, we've not had any issues or any problems like that.
When you say the shelter, is there an emergency shelter that folks?
Well, there is, of course, during our emergency management, they have plans set up for opening shelters in the need of having them. But we also have local people like churches and our homeless shelters and things of that nature that also allows cold weather events for people to come in. And so we're actually developing here in Cherokee County a Code Purple, which is when it's below 32 degrees, sustained below 32 degrees, that we have availability of shelters and places for people to go. And that's not necessarily opening up a shelter for that, is that we have these alternative places, whether it's churches or whether it's the homeless shelter, different places to take people.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah. And then, if the need arises, if we have a huge population or whatever, then emergency management is prepared to open up shelters at that point if we have a crisis.
All right. Yeah. Well, very good. Well, let's get to our main point of the conversation. I know you have been reading a lot of Facebook comments
I have.
lately, and it pertains to your cars.
Right. We made the decision. Actually made the decision a while back, but we just, with all the bad weather and stuff, we just got to last week to put In God We Trust on our cars. And for those that are out there, we're not the only county around that's done that. All of our neighboring counties have done it. I know Graham has, and Macon, and Clay County has done it, and I know that several counties in North Carolina have done it. As a matter of fact, our stickers were donated by Tim Dockery, our local Timco Towing. Made the stickers and donated them for us. And by the way, he's making those available to the public too. If anybody wants those, they can contact him or contact Jan down at Needful Things here in Murphy and get those stickers. I just want to put that in there for him. I know he made that post here the other day. But going back, we're not the only people that's done that. They've done it across the United States, done it across North Carolina. And so we followed suit with that and put it on our cars. And there's actually a group that goes out and does this. And that's what their mission is, of getting the mottos put up in courthouses and public buildings on cars and things of that nature. And when they approached me about this, I told them we'd already had plans for it. But I asked the question, I said, have you had any sheriff's offices or any government agencies turn you down? And they've contacted all 100 counties in North Carolina, and I think of all the sheriff's office and government agencies they've contacted, they've only had two agencies that's declined to put them on their cars. Everybody else has agreed to do so. So make sure people understand we're not the only one out there doing that. There's other people involved in that. But as of right now, I'm checking my phone as we speak. The post that we posted with a picture of our car with In God We Trust on it, currently right now has been viewed 259,634 times. That is huge for
That's probably
Cherokee County.
Yeah, probably the most viewed and commented post in the history of your page.
Yeah, it is. We have had 3,829 likes, 640 comments, and 2,555 shares. Those shares is how it reaches so many people out there. Of course, 259,000 people are not all Cherokee County residents. So that's about 230,000 more people than we have living here.
Things can go viral very quickly.
That's right. So it spread out through these shares and through these contacts into different people. And I was sharing with Tim before we opened this morning that when all this started, there was overwhelmingly people in support of it. It was 98% of the people that commented were in support of putting that on the cars. There were some few people out there that did not support it, that had some negative comments and things of that nature. And because of some of these conversations that were taking place between these people, I had debated on whether just to block the page so people couldn't comment on it. But I decided not to do that. I decided to leave it open, to let people comment, voice their opinions. As long as there wasn't profanity or as long as there wasn't getting too out of hand or too ugly, I was going to let it remain. But there was a few posts that we had to delete. There was a few things that people used vulgarities on or said things they shouldn't have said. But I will tell you this, out of all the comments, the likes and the shares and the people that saw it, I'm sure there's more on there now that I don't know about. So please don't be calling me and saying, hey, this is on here or that's on there. We're going to let it leave like it is right now, and then we'll go from there later about whatever we need to do with it.
Were you expecting such a response?
I was not. I really was not. I would expect a few thousand, kind of like our other posts that we have. Normally when we post drug arrest and things of that nature and these child assaults and different things, typically what we get is somewhere around maybe 8,000 views, and then we get somewhere around 1,000 or so likes kind of on these things. Sometimes it gets as much as 2,000 likes or 3 and some very rarely get that many. But this has just kind of exploded, and it kind of touches kind of the pulse of the nation, I think, and kind of what is going on with our presidential elections that are coming up and with these things that's happening. A lot of people's emotions are running high right now at this point with our country and what we're seeing in our country. So what I wanted to do a little bit today, and we can take this off in whatever direction you want to take it, but I wanted to talk about this motto, "In God We Trust," and I wanted to talk about separation of church and state, because I know that was a topic that some of these people were bringing up and things of that nature. And some of the things the people kind of have an idea about. Some people, they make comments, they have no idea what they're talking about. Some people have a little bit of education on what they're talking about, but I thought I would talk about this a little bit, kind of bring a little history into this so that people kind of know where we're at and why we can put them on the cars and why courthouses can put them in the courthouse and these things. But most people are surprised to discover that the words separation of church and state, they're not contained in the First Amendment. The words are not there.
Right.
And when people talk about separation of church and state, they think it's part of the Constitution when it's really not part of the Constitution. It's nowhere in the Bill of Rights. It's nowhere in the Constitution. It's not in any legal document in the founding of our country. The phrase, of course, separation of church and state is used with the First Amendment, and what it expresses is an idea, not words. It's an idea that was kind of promoted over the years. What the First Amendment actually says is this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and the petition of the government for redress of grievances. In other words, what the First Amendment actually says is that the government cannot establish a religion for the purpose of causing people to force people to follow that religion and make them adhere to that religion. That's what the First Amendment's all about. Article 6 provides that all state and federal officials shall be bound by an oath or affirmation to support the Constitution, but there should be no religious test required as a qualification to any public office or trust. So going along with the First Amendment and Article 6, what the founding fathers were intending, in my opinion. I know you'll get debates about this, but in my opinion, what the founding fathers were trying to establish was that for someone to run for the office of sheriff, or somebody to run for Congress or president of the United States, that they didn't have to be required to be a member of a certain religion. They didn't have to be Christian, or they didn't have to be Muslim, or they didn't have to be Buddhist, or they didn't have to be a certain thing to run for office, that people would have the opportunity to run regardless of what their religious preference was. And so that's kind of how this kind of thing came about. But the thing about this First Amendment, it talks about that Congress shall make no law respecting established religion, but the next thing is what people tend to forget, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And what the First Amendment also guarantees is for those, even those that's in elected position, even those that are in government, that we still have a right to express our beliefs. We still have a right to express those things. And so when we think about this, it's twofold in the First Amendment: not to establish a religion that you have to follow, but also not restricting you from following a religion either. And that's where that separation idea comes from. That's where that wall of separation comes from between church and state, is that the government stays out of the religion business. They just stay out of it completely. And so kind of when we think about this, when we think about the separation of church and state, with the Supreme Court and with the government coming in and making laws restricting religious freedoms, they're violating the very thing which they're stating that others are violating, because the original law was that they have no influence in it whatsoever, whether to establish it or whether to restrict it, that they should have neither side on it. The attack of this separation began by a letter from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist Association, and it was dated back in January of 1802. And Jefferson assured the Baptist of Danbury that, let me find this, I think the letter states this. It says, "I contemplate with sovereign reference that the act of the whole American people which declared that their legislators should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state." And what is important about this is this was a personal letter written to the church. This had nothing to do with the documents of our country. It had nothing to do with any legal documentation. It had nothing to do with the Constitution. Had nothing to do with anything like that. It was a personal paper, private paper, to a church or to the Association of the Churches here. It was written in a response earlier from the Danbury Church, where they were concerned that the First Amendment was a government-given right instead of a God-given right. And what they were concerned was that if the government gave the people the right to religion, they could revoke that right at any time.
Right.
So what Thomas Jefferson was trying to get the people to understand was that the reason he wrote this letter, he wrote them back this letter assuring them that they didn't need to worry because there was a free exercise of religion and it would never be interfered by the government, that the government would never interfere with that religion. And so the very letter that he intended for the government not to interfere with religion is the very letter that Supreme Court in the 60s and 70s used to interfere with religion. It's kind of an odd thing that happened there. But even in 1985, the Justice William Rehnquist wrote that, unfortunately, the Establishment Clause has been expressly freighted by the Jefferson misleading metaphor for nearly 40 years. And the Supreme Court has upheld this idea in particular concerning the motto, "In God We Trust," and that's kind of what we want to talk about today. So the question comes about the motto, "In God We Trust," and where it came about and all that. And I saw a post and heard people talk about that this has only been around since the 1950s and this kind of thing, which is not true. That's not the truth of the matter. What happened was in November of 1861, the Secretary of Treasury, that was Salmon Chase, he wrote to the director of the Mint in Philadelphia, and he wrote to the director and he said that no nation can be strong except in the strength of God, or safe except in his defense. The trust of our people in God should be declared on our national coins. And so he actually, in 1861, petitioned the Mint to print on the coins "In God We Trust." as a national credence or a national motto as to what our country believed in. Now, one thing about this, and we want to make this very clear, at no point in time did our government make a specific religious statement. In other words, they didn't make a statement toward Baptists, they didn't make a statement toward Methodist or toward even Christian religion. They made the statement that our country is founded on the principles of there being a sovereign God, and that we adhere to his rules and regulations of what God has for us. Now, this is all coming from our government. This is not coming from a preacher. This is coming from our government. And what we need to realize about this is that our government was founded upon these principles of the rules and regulations that was established in the Bible and established by God. When we think about morality and we think about society and we think about right and wrong and our laws that we face and criminal activity, if you will, where our laws were based, they were based on the basic right and wrong and what God's law said about things. And when we think about this and people say, well, this is right or that's wrong, how do you base that? What is your standard that you base that by? Because if you feel like there is no God and that their nation should not follow a God and their God should not have anything to do with their government, then where is that standard of right and wrong? And if you think that that the laws that God has established and the laws that the people follow as their being a supreme being, if you don't think that is true and don't think that is so, then what prohibits people from hurting each other? What prohibits people from murdering? What prohibits people from robbing? What prohibits people from doing these things? Because if there is no God, there is no standard. Mm-hmm. And it's just my opinion versus your opinion about things. And so your opinion may be that this is the right way to live, where my opinion may be something different. There has to be a standard for us to compare to. And so our founding fathers knew this. Our founding fathers knew there had to be a standard, and that's why that the Secretary of Treasury stated that no nation can be strong except in the strength of God, or safe except in his defense, and the trust of our people should be declared as what our national motto is. And so this rocked on for several years and went through court, and he, again, in 1863, he wrote again, the director of the Mint, James Pollock, and they had some slogans and things there, our God and our country, and the shield, and he wrote that the Mint director to change the motto from our God, our country to In God We Trust. Mm-hmm. And that's what they decided on in 1863. In 1865, the Congress of the United States approved the patent of this and approved to put it on the coins, and this is kind of how it was established and how it was started. And even as late as on up in October of 1949, President Harry Truman stated, when the United States was established, its coins bore witness to the American faith and a benevolent deity, that the motto then was, In God We Trust, and that's still our motto, and we as a people still place our trust in God. And so when we think about these things, these are things that our government did, that our government established for us to believe in, and this was upheld through the Supreme Court for hearing after hearing, all the way through the 1800s, all the way up through in the early 1900s. And what had happened was, even as recent as Arnall versus United States in 1969, 1970, somewhere along in there, he actually sued the United States for the In God We Trust on the coins, and the motto as being a national motto is it going against the First Amendment. And even in this hearing in Arnall versus United States, the United States Supreme Court even ruled that it was not a violation of the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. And in 1970, Stephen Ray Arnall, he then appealed it to the Ninth Circuit, challenging that this was unconstitutional and that it had no place on government buildings, had no place in our government. And they actually said this, the court ruled, this is the United States Supreme Court through the appellate process, it said, they actually ruled this was a court ruling. It said, it is quite obvious that the national motto and slogan on coinage and currency, In God We Trust, has nothing to do whatsoever with the establishment of religion. Its use is of a patriotic or a ceremonial character, and it bears no true resemblance to a governmental sponsorship of a religious exercise. It is excluded from the First Amendment significance because the motto has no theological or ritualistic impact. And so these people out here that complain that sheriff's offices and people are putting these mottos on their cars, and are complaining that the courthouses are putting these mottos on their courthouse, and I think our commissioners have a plan to put it in the commissioner boardroom here in Cherokee County, and I know Clay County has already done so, and Clay County has already put it on their courthouse and things of that nature. So these people complaining about this, these things have already been through all the way up through the Supreme Court and also through the appellate process. And even the Supreme Court has ruled that it's not a violation of the First Amendment. And so if they've ruled it's not a violation of the First Amendment, then it's not a violation of the First Amendment. Now, we all know that's subject to change.
Right.
We know that could change any day, especially with the passing away of our recent Supreme Court justice that passed away. Depending on who the next justice is they appoint, and depending on what kind of rulings they have, that could potentially change. But as of right now, the Supreme Court has ruled it's not a violation. But the interesting thing about that is, for the founding of our country for 200 years, government has been established by religion. It's been founded upon religion. It's been founded upon the character of God, and it's been ruled through all the courts and upheld through all the courts for 200 years. And these recent Supreme Court rulings, where they're taking prayer out of schools, and where they have taken religious crucifixes and references away from government, and they've done these things where the government can no longer display or do these things, these rulings have been recently. They have been from the 1960s on through the present day. So when we think about this, when we think about where our nation comes from and what we stand on, for 200 years it's existed a certain way, but now all of a sudden people think we know better, and we know better than our founding fathers do. Therefore, we're going to change what our country is doing. And I think that's pretty darn arrogant of us, of citizens, to think that we know better than our founding fathers, and we know better than something that has existed for over 200 years. And so for me and the way I view things, I am a conservative. I don't apologize for being a conservative. I am very conservative in my views and my thinking. I really believe in what our founding fathers did. I believe in our Constitution. I believe in our flag. I believe in our motto. I believe in these things. And for me, placing these things on the cars and displaying these things for the sheriff's office is not a personal statement. It's not a religious statement. It's a patriotic statement of saying how proud I am of the United States of America and what we stand for.
I try to look at all angles of any situation like this, and I try to wonder why people complain so much about just "in God we trust" 4 words.
Right.
Why it, we play Christian music here on the radio station, but I know that we're a private business, and people have the option of just tuning us out if they don't like what we play.
Right.
So I understand, that people. And I try to understand why people do get so mad, and I think a lot of it goes back to the way that a lot of it is, if we have an aggressive salesperson here at the radio station go into a business and their sales tactic is not, I think it's a lot of the way that people present the gospel to people, and they feel that it's being forced down their throat.
Yeah, I think it is in a lot of ways. that is a lot of truth in that.
And so a lot of people get, from a very young age, just wanting to stay away from these people that are, it's my way or no way.
Right.
And they're not always speaking the way that is attractive to someone to want to.
And this is the thing, and this is what's important for people to understand also, because there were some very hateful things that were said. Mm-hmm. There was, like I said, there were some vulgarities in some of the comments that were made, and there were some insinuations that were made as far as the office of sheriff and what we would do and what we weren't doing, how we would respond to people and things of that nature. Well, placing 4 words on your car doesn't change the way you respond to people. It doesn't change the way you act with people and the way you react with people. And so, we are going to respond the same way and act the same way and be professional with people, regardless whether those 4 words are on the car or whether they're not. And so, to say that we are going to not respond to people of different faiths, or to say that we're not going to protect people who don't believe like we do, or things of that nature, is ludicrous. That people would make statements like that. because we're going to react the same way, whether it's the 4 words that's the sticker on a card doesn't change the nature of a person.
Right.
It doesn't change the way you're going to act to things or react to things. And so I think people are stretching, they're reaching for straws, and they're trying to, because of whatever their personal beliefs are, they're trying to convince others to side with them and to believe the way they believe. And I, like I said in the beginning, I did considerably think about blocking these posts and to where nobody could comment one way or another. But that's part of our Constitution. That's part of our rights, is to be able to express our opinion, whether we agree or whether we disagree.
Right.
And I don't think that if we're going to stand here and say we believe in the Constitution and we believe in what our founding fathers did, then I think that we shouldn't have to go back and try to censorship people and go back and try to say your opinion does not count or your opinion does not matter. I think we need to give people the opportunity to voice their opinion and the opportunity to say what they think. I had a pastor, many people know him, Fred Lunsford. He was my pastor for several years, and he used to have the saying, "You have the right to be wrong if you want to be." And that's kind of the way I look at this situation. You have the right to voice your opinion, right or wrong, because that is protected by the Constitution. And I don't think that if we're going to be a constitutionalist, if we're going to defend the Constitution, then we need to defend all of it, not just pieces and parts of it.
And one thing that I was disappointed in reading, some of the comments there from both sides, the non-believers and those that are Christians.
Right.
A lot of the comments were not a very good representation of God's love.
No, they were not.
Even from the Christian side, that is not a good way to say this is what we represent.
Right.
It was a lot of fighting instead of, and so the one thing I encourage folks to be is just to be a good representation. I remember growing up, going to Hanging Dog Baptist Church, and there's a sweet little old lady, always smile, give me a dime out of her pocketbook every Sunday, and you could just see the humble sincereness in her, and that I don't think she ever spoke a hateful word.
Right.
And that kind of person